One, we're going to continue discussing about writing the methodology of research. Okay, today I'll be giving you a few samples of how to do methodologies on different types of research. In this case, we will be tackling basically about quantitative research and qualitative research. But since based on the titles that I have received recently, we will be discussing quantitative types of methodologies dominantly, but of course we'll do qualitative discussion in passing, because sometimes research are a combination or a mixed method, So we will start now. So just to be consistent, we will be using the research on women's mental health. Okay. So just be mindful of the theme that we are discussing. It's above here. You can see my arrow, women's mental health. Okay, in the methodology, you have the first part, the one that I'm shading right now. Of course, methodology is a major part of research. That's why it's highlighted. No, it's in a boldface format. So you have, it says here, this chapter systematically demonstrates then all the parts of the methodology part. No, so you'll have to mention that in the first paragraph, like design, the instrument, population and sampling, the procedure, statistical treatment, or the way you will be decoding your data or analyzing it, right? How in qualitative, you have coding, decoding, thematic, and emerging themes, etc. And the first part of methodology is the population and sampling design. In this case, the research is basically quantitative and qualitative. So you have mental health, the mental health aspect, and the economic aspect of the research. No, so there are two population and sampling designs, no, for this research. It says here, sampling, purposive sampling was used for quantitative part to elicit data for the mental health aspect of the body. So you have to be very, very clear. No? Design, which does it, method, design of doing your, of sampling is addressing or is going to be used is into which aspect of your research. So in case, it's about mental health, right? So you have there already, the study included 200 women respondents, etc., etc. No, so you have to break them down. So you have to mention in figures. No, in some instances, you also do a table. No, a table for your population, specifically if you're doing stratified sampling. No, I'm not discuss in details the different types of sampling techniques. In many cases, if it's a full-blown copy of the dissertation or thesis, you have a table. But since this is an IMRAD format, the one that we are discussing now, there's a limitation of characters or words, no, to be used. That's why we don't use a table already. So you just explain it per paragraph. And if you would notice, it's really summarized, no, what is just substantial and just appropriate when you do publication, no, IMRAD publication. So because just for the information of everyone, based on my experience in publishing in journals, they would ask you to do it in 4,000 words, no? A minimum of 4,000 words to around 8,000 words. So in hindsight, it's just like around 10 pages, 10 pages to 50 pages, depending on, of course, there are formats like the spacing, etc., etc. But usually they measure it based on the word count. Okay, going back. So still in the population and sampling, you have here the second aspect, which is the qualitative part of the study. No, so the women's economy. So that's qualitative part. So usually you do interviews on a minimum number of respondents. In this case, we have 30 women, no, in different backgrounds. So you have to break down 10 teachers who are retrenched during the pandemic, 10 teachers currently employed in the private schools, 5 currently employed teachers in the public schools, and 5 students from the public schools, no, women students. So usually in the complete format of thesis, you get to explain already why these types of breakdowns of respondents in a qualitative form. Okay, so in this case, since we have limited space only and word count, we will only be including uh, the specifics, no, of or the numbers or the figures of your respondents. But anyway, it is very clear, no, in this shaded part or highlighted part, you have here the quantitative aspect of the research, and here the qualitative aspect of the population and sampling design. Okay. What about the instruments? So how do we discuss about the instruments? No. So the same. If you're doing quanti-quali, you will be explaining it in the instrument, right? The point of instrument is basically what are the tools that you're going to use in order to gather the data, right? So you should have appropriate instruments to get this data. So it says here, the quantitative part of the research use an original instrument on women's mental health adversities with 13 categories and 6 stages. So you have to be very specific. Now, for the qualitative aspect of the research, the study used interview questions using the following guide. Yeah. So it's very specific. Of course, you know it very well that, you know, when you have questions, interview questions, it should be based on the guided statements of the problems or research objectives. Okay. Research is supposed to be organized and aligned with each other, no? Just like what I mentioned in the lectures of literature and introduction, you are guided by either your statements of the problems or objectives or your conceptual framework. Okay. Okay, let's go to another example of stating your instrument. For me, I like this way of stating the instrument. Wait, I'm gonna change what I'll be sharing. Okay. 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 Just to be very clear with our discussion, this research is about the food establishment, practicing halal, inventory, assessment, and promotional initiatives. So thank you very much to my co-authors for allowing me to use these materials. Let's go to methodology on how they presented their instrument. Okay. So I just want to make it clear. Maybe you can screenshot this one. These are the research objectives. No, there are different formats of stating your research objectives or problems. So in this case, because it's mixed method, we can use the objective type, or you can use the question type. There's no hard rules on this. No, just like what I've learned in my in my class before. There are instructors that are very firm on certain formats, but to me, I don't think it should matter, because what's important is the end point of your research, and you are guided, no, by an objective or question. Anyway, whether it's objective or in a question format, these are templates that would be guiding you towards a certain searching, no, like searching for information, searching for findings, no, and outcomes. So this will be your guide, no, in this research, this will be your guide in doing your instruments. So let's take a look. Okay, the methodology, so population and sampling, it's the same way of writing, but what's different is writing the instruments. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna highlight the instrument. I think there are 5 instruments that they will be using, no? So it depends on, for the sake of discussion, I'm gonna highlight them into the red font, no? Okay. So these are the types of instrument. Of course, you need to have a title of your instrument to be properly labeled, no? So if you would notice, these things that I'm highlighting with the red font is basically, these are the instruments based on the objectives. So you can present also your instrument or writing your methodology in the aspect of instrument using this format. So you have here the name of the instrument for which objective or for which statement, problem statement, right? To some extent, this is very organized. Then what are you going to use as an instrument to the second objective? And so forth and so on. Okay. Of course, there might be some questions, no, that will have the same instrument. Then it's okay. For example, survey of halal practices scale or checklist. If you're using this instrument to two of your objective, then it's okay. No, so to determine the level of compliance and to determine the level of practices. It will be answering the questions or the objectives on blah, blah, blah. So it's okay. Also, if you have one instrument which will answer three of the objectives or three of the statements of the problem, then it's okay. What is very good in this format is you enumerated your instruments based on the objectives. So, and I think it's kind of very, very clear. No? In terms of gathering procedures, or if, there are different formats, by the way. No, in IMRAD format, some of the practices that I've noticed is when you write your gathering procedure, it's not in the enumerated form, no, in a list form, but rather in a paragraph form. So it depends on which publication or journal you're submitting your research onto, no. And of course, for requirement submission, it depends on your on your teacher. But to me, there's no hard rule, no. In fact, there are some journals also. Your statements of the problem and your objectives are constructed in a paragraph form. Of course, because maybe they thought na it's for publication. It's not for anything else, right? Okay. But for our data gathering procedure, let's proceed to the enumerated format, no? Para we can start with a very clear way of looking at it. So let's go back to the example on the women's mental health. Okay. Data gathering procedure. So the researchers ethically ask permission from the respondents to answer the survey, interview, and essay. If it's quali-quanti, huh? So if it's only survey, then it's only survey. And there are some instances that you need to write uh, ask permission from the respondents and institutions. No? Usually, if they to certain institutions, especially if their responses are in any way affects their institution. No? I mean, it involves their institution. Wrong word, not affect, but if it involves their institution. But that's of course if it's needed. No. So all participants. Okay. I did not enumerate this, so it's still in a paragraph form. But anyway, the ingredients includes permission. That's the first part. We have it here, the shaded part. The next one is all participants were given a letter of consent, blah, 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 blah. Wait, push this downward. So they have to be informed and they have to have consent. Definitely, you will be getting information for people who have consented, no, themselves to be a part of your study. Then the third part is the survey and guide questions were administered through online and follow up through phone calls, no? Maybe the way you gathered it. Sometimes before pandemic, you administer it manually, right? So in their very own phase. So right now it's different. I mean, this way of gathering data is anyway allowed. No? It's still valid. The fourth one is respondents were given clear instruction before the conduct of the survey and the guided questions. Of course, they need to be instructed properly because some says they do not understand the scaling, no? Are they marking strongly agree as 4 or 1 or vice versa? You have to be clear because it might affect your data analysis later on if you use wrongly gathered uh, information based on the survey. And the fifth one is they were asked whether they have understood the instruction and were allowed to ask questions and clarifications. Then instrument were administered in the last week, the date you had it, blah blah blah, and up till when. Uh of course, some other statements include ethical guidelines. Guys, no, the context of ethics is important. It's a must. That's why it's specifically stated here. Ethical guidelines were put into place for the research period. Participants were fully informed regarding the objectives of the study, while they were reassured that the data collected are completely confidential. In fact, in the survey instrument, no, for example, when you forward a Google form or tell them to answer a Google form, the instruction should be there, no, the objective should be there, and etc. You're not gonna be getting information from private individuals or from institutions without telling them what is your purpose, no. And of course, there will be stating that there will be no physical harm which may endanger the respondents the entire duration of the study. Okay. Then after that is the part of the data analysis. So in quantitative, you have data gathered were analyzed using frequency distribution, mean, standard deviation, t-test, and ANOVA for descriptive data, for all the descriptive data. So of course, it depends on which treatments you are going to use, no, for the data analysis. So uh, it may change depending on uh, how you deal with your statistics, no? Quantitative. For quali, uh, usually, of course, you gather information from the interview, the same sets of data gathering, but in the analysis, you may use thematic segregation of answers, decoding them, or maybe trying to segregate also emerging ideas or emerging themes, right? Of course, that's only based on qualitative research based on interview, phenomenology, lived experiences, etc., etc. There are different ways of data analysis based on discourse analysis, no, mga language studies. Different uh, data analysis are also made for some other forms of ethnographic research, traditional research. So, but then we're not going to talk about that. It's going to be very complex already. So that's it. That ends our discussion on the methods. So you have parts of methodology. Important parts are population and sampling design, the instruments, data gathering procedure, and data analysis. So these are the things that we expect in your methodology. Okay? That ends my discussion. If you have any questions, you can raise it in our group chat or messenger. For now, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you understood some of the concepts that you were looking for.